You've spent years trying to become someone worthy of the life you want, reading books, attending seminars, repeating mantras in the mirror like incantations that might finally break the curse of your ordinary existence. You've molded yourself into what you think success looks like, adopted the habits of the wealthy, mimicked the confidence of those who seem to have it all figured out. But here's what no one tells you. Every mask you wear, every part of yourself you reject to become more acceptable, more spiritual, more deserving, you're actually pushing away the very things you're desperate to attract. Carl Jung discovered something that shattered everything psychology thought it knew about human transformation. He found that the kings, the truly magnetic individuals throughout history, weren't the ones who perfected themselves or transcended their darkness. They were the ones who had the courage to descend into their own underworld, to face the monster in the basement of their psyche and integrate it. Not destroy it, not overcome it, integrate it. And when they did, something alchemical happened. They stopped chasing, stopped performing, stopped trying to manifest, and reality began bending toward them like iron filings to a magnet. This isn't mysticism. This is depth psychology revealing what ancient wisdom always knew. You don't attract through addition, you attract through integration. And everything you've been running from, every shameful thought, every dark impulse, every failure you've tried to bury, these aren't obstacles to your magnetic power. They are your magnetic power, waiting to be reclaimed. Let me tell you what really happens when you try to attract something into your life from a place of incompleteness. You're essentially a fragmented being, split into 1,000 pieces, some parts banished to the unconscious because they're too painful, too ugly, too unacceptable. You walk around as a fraction of yourself, maybe 20% conscious, 80% operating from the shadows. And then you wonder why manifestation doesn't work, why you keep attracting the same painful patterns, why the universe seems to ignore your prayers. Here's why. The unconscious is not passive. It's not just a storage unit for forgotten memories. The unconscious is actively creating your reality every single moment, and whatever you've repressed down there is running the show. Jung called this the shadow, and he said something that most people completely misunderstand. He said the shadow is 90% gold. Read that again. 90% gold. The very things you're most ashamed of, most afraid of, most desperate to hide, contain the raw power, the life force, the magnetic energy you've been searching for outside yourself. Think about it. What did you have to repress to be loved as a child? Maybe your anger, because anger wasn't acceptable in your family. Maybe your sexuality, because desire was shameful. Maybe your ambition, because wanting more was considered selfish. Maybe your vulnerability, because showing weakness invited attack. Whatever it was, you cut it off, threw it into the basement of your psyche, and that piece of you has been down there ever since, growing in the dark, festering, demanding to be seen. And here's the devastating truth. You will keep attracting situations that force you to confront what you've repressed. That's not punishment. That's the psyche's drive toward wholeness. You keep attracting angry partners because your own anger is locked in the shadow. You keep attracting financial crisis because your relationship with power is unconscious. You keep attracting betrayal because you've betrayed yourself by rejecting parts of who you are. Jung studied alchemy, and everyone thought he was losing his mind, wasting his genius on medieval superstition. But he wasn't studying how to turn lead into gold. He was studying the alchemical process as a metaphor for psychological transformation. The alchemists knew something. They knew that to create gold, you had to start with the prima materia, the base matter, the shit, the decay, the rejected material. You couldn't skip that step. You had to descend into the negredo, the blackening, the dark night of the soul, and work with what was there, not transcend it, not spiritually bypass it, work with it. The alchemists would say, in stercor invenitur, in filth it will be found. The treasure is in the trash, the gold is in the shadow. And this is where modern spirituality goes catastrophically wrong. We're taught to focus on the light, raise our vibration, think positive, love and light and good vibes only. We're taught that negative emotions are low frequency, that anger is toxic, that sadness is weakness, that fear is something to overcome. So we create this false self, this spiritual ego that's all peace and love and gratitude, and we shove everything else deeper into the unconscious. And then we wonder why we're not magnetic, why we're not manifesting, why life feels increasingly empty despite all our spiritual practices. It's because you're not whole, you're a performance. And the universe doesn't respond to performances, it responds to authenticity, to integration, to wholeness. Here's what Jung discovered by studying himself, by having the courage to descend into his own madness and document what he found. He discovered that the psyche has an intelligence far beyond the ego's understanding. He discovered that symptoms, neuroses, what we call mental illness, these aren't disorders to be fixed, they're messages from the unconscious, symbolic communications about what needs to be integrated. That depression you've been medicating, fighting, trying to positive think your way out of, it's not a chemical imbalance, or not just that. It's the psyche's way of forcing you to descend, to stop, to face what you've been running from. That anxiety that wakes you at 3 in the morning with your heart pounding, it's not irrational. It's the shadow self screaming for attention, begging you to acknowledge what you've disowned. Those repetitive nightmares, those intrusive thoughts, those self-sabotaging behaviors that make no logical sense. They're not evidence that you're broken. They're breadcrumbs leading you back to the parts of yourself waiting to be reclaimed. And when you finally stop running, when you turn around and face the monster, something miraculous happens. The monster transforms. Not because you defeated it, but because you saw it, acknowledged it, integrated it. That's the secret of kings. Kings don't rule through perfection, they rule through wholeness. They've integrated their capacity for ruthlessness with their capacity for compassion. They've integrated their vulnerability with their strength. They've integrated their selfishness with their generosity. They're not trying to be good, they're trying to be whole. And wholeness is magnetic in a way that perfection never will be. Let me ask you something, and I want you to really sit with this. What would happen if you stopped trying to fix yourself? What would happen if you approached your darkness not as an enemy to conquer, but as an exile waiting to come home? What would happen if you listened to your anger instead of suppressing it, felt your grief instead of distracting from it, acknowledged your selfishness instead of pretending to be selfless? I know what you're thinking. If I let myself feel these things, if I acknowledge these dark parts, I'll become them. I'll be consumed. I'll hurt people, I'll lose control. But that's not how the psyche works. Repression creates compulsion. What you resist persists. The anger you refuse to feel doesn't go away. It leaks out in passive aggression, in chronic resentment, in explosive rage. The grief you won't acknowledge doesn't disappear. It becomes depression, numbness, the inability to feel joy. The fear you won't admit doesn't vanish. It becomes anxiety, hypervigilance, the constant sense that danger is lurking. Integration doesn't mean acting out every impulse. Integration means making the unconscious conscious, bringing the shadow into the light where it can be metabolized, transformed, and alchemized into power. This is what Jung meant when he said, "I'd rather be whole than good." He wasn't advocating for immorality. He was saying that the pursuit of goodness at the expense of wholeness creates a divided self, and a divided self cannot be magnetic, cannot be powerful, cannot be fully alive. Pause here for a moment. I want you to do something. Think about the pattern in your life that keeps repeating, the one that makes you feel crazy because you swear you're doing everything differently but somehow end up in the same place. Maybe it's relationships where you feel unseen. Maybe it's jobs where you feel undervalued. Maybe it's friendships where you feel drained. Now ask yourself this question. What part of me am I rejecting that keeps showing up in my external reality, demanding to be seen? Drop your answer in the comments. Just write, "I've been rejecting my," and complete that sentence. This isn't just for you. When you name your shadow in the light of community, something shifts. You'll be amazed how many people are rejecting the exact same parts of themselves. You'll realize you're not alone in this, and that realization itself begins the integration process. So go ahead, comment now. Let's bring our shadows into the light together. Now let's go deeper into what actually makes someone magnetic, because this is where everything you've been taught about attraction falls apart. You've been told that like attracts like, that you need to embody the frequency of what you want to attract, and there's truth in that, but it's incomplete. What really makes someone magnetic is not their light, it's their depth. It's the fact that they've been to hell and back. They've faced their demons, they've integrated their contradictions, and they've emerged not perfect, not healed, not transcended, but whole. Wholeness has gravity. Wholeness pulls people, opportunities, synchronicities toward it without effort, because wholeness is rare. Most people are fragmented, split, at war with themselves. They're performing goodness while their shadow acts out unconsciously. They're chasing abundance while unconsciously punishing themselves for childhood guilt. They're seeking love while unconsciously recreating their original wound. And you can feel it when you meet them, can't you? There's something off, something incongruent, something that doesn't quite land. But when you meet someone who's integrated their shadow, who's done the descent, who's no longer pretending, you feel it immediately. There's a presence, a solidity, a realness that's magnetic precisely because it's not trying to be anything other than what it is. Jung called this individuation, the process of becoming who you actually are, rather than who you think you should be. And he said very clearly, individuation is not about becoming better, it's about becoming more yourself. All of yourself, including the parts that don't fit the spiritual narrative, the parts that are selfish and petty and cruel and weak. Here's what happens energetically when you integrate your shadow. You stop leaking power. Think about how much energy you spend every day maintaining your false self, keeping certain thoughts out of awareness, making sure your mask doesn't slip, managing other people's perceptions of you. It's exhausting. That energy, that life force is being drained constantly just to maintain the repression. But when you integrate, when you admit to yourself, yes, I am angry, yes, I am jealous, yes, I am afraid, yes, I want things for selfish reasons, something radical happens. You stop fighting yourself. That energy that was being used for repression becomes available. And that energy is what makes you magnetic. It's your libido in the Jungian sense, your life force, no longer divided against itself, but flowing freely. And here's the paradox that will blow your mind. When you stop trying to be good and simply become whole, you naturally become more ethical, more compassionate, more connected, not because you're trying, but because you're no longer acting out unconsciously. The person who admits to their capacity for cruelty is far less likely to be cruel than the person who believes they're incapable of it. The person who acknowledges their selfishness can then consciously choose generosity. The person who owns their weakness can then access real strength. This is what Jung meant by the reconciliation of opposites, the union of conscious and unconscious, the marriage of ego and shadow. And when that marriage happens, you become what the alchemists called the philosopher's stone, the substance that transforms everything it touches. Let me tell you what this looks like practically, because I know some of you are thinking this is too abstract, too philosophical. Let's say you want to attract financial abundance, but you grew up poor, and in your family, wealthy people were talked about with disdain. Money was called the root of all evil. Wanting more than enough was considered greedy. So you have this conscious desire for abundance, but unconsciously you associate wealth with being a bad person. What happens? You sabotage every opportunity. You undercharge for your services. You give away your time for free. You make decisions that keep you broke while telling yourself you're just not good with money. That's not true. You're very good at staying aligned with your unconscious programming. The shadow work here isn't to just affirm that you deserve wealth. It's to go into the shadow and find that part of you that believes rich people are evil, that believes poverty is noble, that believes suffering is how you earn love. You have to meet that part, understand where it came from, why it formed, what it was protecting you from. Maybe believing money was evil protected you from feeling the pain of not having it. Maybe believing poverty was noble gave meaning to your family's struggle. You don't shame that part, you honor it for the job it did, and then you consciously choose to update it. You integrate the truth that money is neutral, that abundance doesn't make you evil, that you can be wealthy and still be a good person. But you can't just think that. You have to feel it, embody it, integrate it at the unconscious level. And when you do, opportunities start appearing that you couldn't see before, not because the universe suddenly decided to bless you, but because you're no longer unconsciously rejecting them. Or let's say you want to attract a loving relationship, but every partner you choose is emotionally unavailable or critical or unfaithful. You think you just have bad luck, that you keep choosing wrong. But here's what's really happening. You have an unconscious belief, probably formed in childhood, that love is conditional, that you have to earn it through performance, that if someone really sees you, they'll leave. So unconsciously, you choose partners who confirm that belief. Not because you're stupid, but because the psyche seeks consistency. Even if that consistency is painful, the unknown is more terrifying than the familiar hell. The shadow work here is to find that wounded child part that formed the belief that you're unlovable as you are. Maybe your parents' love was conditional on achievement. Maybe you were punished for showing certain emotions. Maybe you learned that being yourself led to rejection. That part is still choosing your partners, still running the show, and it will keep doing so until you bring it into consciousness, until you meet it with compassion, until you give it what it needed then, which is unconditional acceptance. When you integrate that part, when you truly believe at the unconscious level that you're worthy of love as you are, you stop choosing unavailable partners, not because you're trying harder, but because they're no longer a match for your frequency. You'll literally find them boring, incomprehensible. You'll wonder what you ever saw in that dynamic. That's how you know integration has happened. The old pattern becomes impossible to participate in. Now, here's where this gets really profound, and this is what separates Jung from every other psychological or spiritual system. Jung understood that the unconscious isn't just personal, it's collective. There's a layer of the psyche deeper than your individual wounds, deeper than your childhood programming, deeper than your cultural conditioning. He called it the collective unconscious, and it contains the archetypes, the universal patterns of human experience that have existed since consciousness emerged from matter. The hero, the shadow, the anima, the animus, the wise old man, the great mother. These aren't just concepts, they're autonomous forces in the psyche that can possess you if you're not conscious of them. And here's what's crucial to understand. You cannot integrate your personal shadow without eventually confronting the archetypal shadow. The capacity for evil isn't just yours, it's human. The rage, the greed, the lust for power, the cruelty, these aren't personal failings, they're part of the human inheritance. And until you acknowledge that you carry the same capacity for darkness as every human who's ever lived, you'll keep projecting it outward, seeing it in others, fighting it in the world, while remaining blind to it in yourself. Jung said that the most terrifying thing he ever discovered was that he was capable of the same evil as the Nazis. Not that he would do it, but that the capacity was there. And owning that capacity, integrating it, making it conscious, that's what prevented him from being possessed by it. This is the secret of kings that no one wants to hear. Kings understand power, real power, not the performance of power. And real power requires integrating the capacity for ruthlessness, for strategic cruelty, for the willingness to do what's necessary even when it's not nice. A king who can't access his inner tyrant will be overthrown by someone who can. But a king who's integrated his tyrant, who's made it conscious, who knows when to use that energy and when to restrain it, that king is truly powerful because he's not possessed by the archetype, he's in relationship with it. And the same is true for you. Whatever you want to attract, whatever power you want to embody, requires you to integrate its shadow. You want to be a healer, you have to integrate your capacity to wound. You want to be a leader, you have to integrate your capacity to manipulate. You want to be a creator, you have to integrate your capacity to destroy. This isn't about becoming evil, it's about becoming conscious of the full range of human possibility within you, so that you're choosing your actions from awareness rather than being unconsciously driven by repressed energies. And if you've stayed with me this far, if something in you is recognizing this truth, do me a favor. Hit that like button, not for me, but because this information needs to reach the people who are ready for it. The algorithm shows this to more people when you engage, and there's someone out there right now, maybe scrolling in desperation, who needs to hear that their darkness isn't a defect, it's the doorway to their power. And subscribe to this channel if you want to keep going deeper into the psychology of transformation, because we're building a community of people who are done with spiritual bypassing and ready for the real work. All right, let's keep going. So how do you actually do this work? How do you integrate the shadow? Because knowing about it intellectually doesn't change anything. Integration is experiential, it's visceral, it happens in the body and the heart, not just the mind. Jung's method was active imagination, a practice where you consciously dialogue with the unconscious. You sit in meditation, but instead of trying to empty your mind or transcend your thoughts, you invite the shadow to speak. You ask it questions. What do you want? What are you trying to tell me? What happens if I keep ignoring you? And you listen. You let images arise, let feelings surface, let the disowned parts of yourself have a voice. And what comes up will terrify you at first. You'll hear thoughts you've never allowed yourself to think. You'll feel rage you didn't know you were carrying. You'll see desires you've condemned as shameful. But you don't act on them, you witness them. You create a container of consciousness large enough to hold them without judgment. And slowly, over time, something shifts. The energy that was locked in repression becomes available. The parts that were frozen in the shadow begin to thaw. You start to feel more alive, more real, more integrated, and your external reality begins to shift, not because you're manifesting differently, but because you're being differently. Another method is paying attention to your projections. Whatever you strongly react to in other people, especially if it's a disproportionate reaction, that's your shadow. If someone's confidence enrages you, you've disowned your own confidence. If someone's neediness disgusts you, you've repressed your own needs. If someone's success triggers intense jealousy, you've abandoned your own ambition. The world is a mirror, and everyone in it is reflecting back aspects of your psyche. When you start to see it that way, when you take responsibility for your projections, you reclaim enormous power. Instead of blaming others, instead of trying to change them, you ask, what part of me is being shown here? What have I disowned that's appearing in front of me demanding to be seen? And then you integrate it. You admit, yes, I want to be seen. Yes, I want recognition. Yes, I'm ambitious. Yes, I'm needy. Yes, I'm capable of cruelty. And in that admission, the projection dissolves. The person stops bothering you because you're no longer using them to hold your disowned self. Dreams are another royal road to the unconscious. That's Jung's phrase. Your dreams aren't random neural firings. They're symbolic communications from the deeper layers of the psyche. Every person in your dreams represents an aspect of yourself. Every scenario is showing you something about your inner world. If you're being chased, something in you is running from something else in you. If you're in a house with hidden rooms, there are parts of your psyche you haven't explored. If someone you know appears behaving strangely, they're representing a quality you associate with them that's active in your unconscious. Start keeping a dream journal. Write them down immediately upon waking. Don't interpret them intellectually. Feel into them. What's the emotional tone? What's being revealed? What's asking to be integrated? Over time, patterns emerge. You start to see the same symbols, the same themes, the psyche circling around what needs attention. And when you finally give it attention, when you honor the message, the dreams shift. New symbols appear. Deeper layers reveal themselves. This is the psyche's natural drive toward wholeness, toward individuation, and it never stops. Even when you ignore it, especially when you ignore it, it keeps trying to get your attention through symptoms, through suffering, through the repetition of painful patterns. The truth that will set you free but first make you miserable is this: you are not a victim of your circumstances. You are a co-creator of them through your unconscious mind. Everything in your life, the good and the bad, the wanted and the unwanted, is reflecting back your level of integration. When you're fragmented, life is chaotic. When you're at war with yourself, you're at war with the world. When you've disowned your power, you feel powerless. When you've rejected your worthiness, you attract situations that confirm your unworthiness. But here's the beautiful part. If you created this unconsciously, you can recreate it consciously. Not through force, not through willpower, not through positive thinking, but through integration. Through making the unconscious conscious. Through befriending your shadow. Through becoming whole. And when you do, when you stop abandoning yourself, when you stop performing for love, when you stop running from your own depth, you become magnetic in a way that transcends explanation. Opportunities find you. People are drawn to you. Resources flow to you. Not because you're special, but because you're whole. And wholeness is what the universe recognizes as readiness. Here's what I want you to understand as we come to the close of this. The spiritual path is not ascension, it's descent. It's not about rising above your humanity, it's about diving deeper into it. It's not about transcending the darkness, it's about illuminating it. The treasure you've been searching for outside yourself, the love, the abundance, the purpose, the peace, it's not out there. It's in the shadow. It's in the parts of you that you exiled because they were too much, too painful, too unacceptable. And the journey back to wholeness, the journey of integration, is the most courageous thing you'll ever do. It requires you to stop performing, stop pretending, stop trying to be good, and start trying to be real. It requires you to face the monster in the basement and discover it's not a monster at all. It's you, the parts of you that have been waiting in the dark, holding your power, your gold, your life force, waiting for you to come home. This is the secret of kings. They didn't conquer their shadow, they married it. They didn't destroy their darkness, they integrated it. And in doing so, they became whole, magnetic, powerful beyond measure. Not because they were special, but because they had the courage to become themselves. So I'm asking you now, will you keep running? Will you keep performing? Will you keep trying to attract from a place of fragmentation? Or will you do the real work? The shadow work, the descent into your own underworld to reclaim the gold that's waiting there. Because when you do, you won't need to learn how to attract anything. You'll be so whole, so integrated, so authentically yourself that life itself will reorganize around you, and everything you need will come not because you chased it, but because you finally stopped running from yourself.